Good day to you. This is Anagalactic. On the first day of February, it is still night, not quite dawn yet, and today we have a special presentation which will be somewhat bracketing information, which I believe is high time you received to give you orientation towards science in general and this world in general. Although we do concentrate on science, it's no longer possible to divorce science from the world situation. It never really was. So we do need to consider science in a larger bracketing sense, and this is my specialty. I supply perspective to human beings who are interested in rational logic, so as to supply the choices that you need to make rational decisions in your life course. That is the purpose of science. The purpose of science is only tangentially for technology. Technology is under the control of governments. It's not a private enterprise, it's a group enterprise, which means it's directly involved with evil. We know that from the constant warfare that goes on between governments. Very rarely occurs between human beings who tend to be religiously oriented due to societal teachings. But that has been suppressed, certainly in the Western world. The so-called white world of Europe and America is now fully under the control of an evil entity. And it is an entity with a consciousness. And we can see that through a careful observation of politics in the world today, that the concept of individuality is completely erased. The only power that exists on the face of the earth now is a single entity attempting to consolidate its control of the economy of the world. That will, of course, be accomplished through the leadership of America, the most evil nation that's ever existed among a host of purely evil nations. There has never been a good government. All governments are evil. And so it's very important to face that and just remove the wool from off your eyes. Now, what we're going to cover today is the dimensionality of space, but we're going to get to a topic that I find forces us conveniently into a juxtaposition of scientific propaganda with what a human would ordinarily call reality, beginning with how we see space and how we measure space. This does not at first appear to be a soiled topic or a fecal topic, but everything is fecal now. Nothing is pure. Everything we were taught in school is literally shit. From Euclid to the present day, there has been a malignant force that has been consistently and concertedly rising to power. And now that the end of the earth is almost near, and there are at least a dozen fatal diseases from which the earth cannot recover no matter what humans do now, the end is upon us. Now, prophets have been saying such things for a long time, but today you need to face the music, or you're simply going to be a nigger. A nigger, yes. Just the existence of that word gives an indication of the absolute depravity of man. Taken statistically, mankind is the only evil thing in the universe. If there is a Satan, and of course there is, it's entirely subsumed into men, human males, human full-grown males, who ordinarily have a chance to be moral and ethical, but under the control of governments which control everything now, it is no longer possible to be a so-called good man. Your mathematicians are absolutely blind to what they're actually doing. There is no such thing as a good scientist. The mathematicians are the worst. They're absolutely depraved in their condition of blindness. And they espouse the most nonsensical absurdities about mathematics and the ability of mathematics to compute the universe, that they're just simply a laughing stock. And that will come forward in our discussion of dimensional space, because you're going to have to change yourself or you're not going to make it. The way we see is dictated by DNA and the dynamic system of the universe into which we were born. Because we do have a visual perceptual system, obviously we were designed to have vision. And being blind, this doesn't matter. You still have a perceptual system, a visual perceptual system. And a blind person is not really inferior in any way to a man who has use of his two eyes. I've been over that several times. I'm sure you can accept that if you're a rational person. So we do need to think about how we see. We are naturally taught how to see by our society in school. We arrive at a method of referring. This is called introspection, a method of referring to our own visual perceptual system. Unfortunately, we have Euclid, and most unfortunately, we don't have any intelligent men to break the chains of Euclid. So we're going to talk about space in a way you've never heard it spoken of, beginning with a concerted attack on what is called 3D space, which is a pure illusion. And so I'll begin reading. Everything you're about to hear was composed in the wee hours of the morning on February 1st. The time is approximately 2 a.m. Reading White, writing of 1961, I find a congenial perspective. How many times have you heard the term 3D? Okay, think about that for a second. It's ubiquitous. Space is 3D. Is it? Let's find out. Has anyone ever paused to explain what 3D means? Well, you might say it means volume space. Does it? Does it really? One might confute that easily. Confute means to deny an assertion. Yes, 3D refers to space, but what are the 3Ds and why are there three? 3 is a very peculiar number. It's most remarkable that no one has ever questioned the nature of 3D linear space. Is that even an accurate appraisal of space? You could say yes and you could say no. It's superpositional. And if you haven't learned from me the full import of the most profound term superposition or superpositionality, then you will gain somewhat of an insight from what I'm about to say. Superposition means there are two layers, and superposition can be paradoxical because the two layers cannot exist at the same time. They're contradictory. In most cases of superposition, you can decompose the superpositionality in context so that there are two contexts to the two seeming conflicting perspectives on the same thing. Superposition means you're considering something, a phenomenon, or something in physics, something in reality, but you're forced to consider it in two contradictory ways. You may recognize that that's the nature of the quantum paradox, which I have solved. So all of this is to lead up to quantum gravity, which is the correct solution for all the paradoxes in physics now. I discovered that, so you're going to learn it from me. All right. The question no one ever answers, because the answer would expose the fallacies involved, is this question: why are there three Ds? Why is it 3D? What is D and why is it 3? In fact, space has no linear characteristics. If you pause to think about that for a moment, you'll easily be able to convince yourself of the truth of that statement. It does have a footnote, though, but I simply indicate there is a footnote. What we call distance is now known to be a convenient illusion. There is no straight line to the moon, for instance, nor do any straight lines measure pure distance. In fact, space is curved. Everything is curved. Nothing is linear. Nothing in the whole universe is d anything. There is no such thing as dimension. Do you know who proved that? It was Albert Einstein. I fully accept his discovery. It's the most important discovery of the 20th century. And that's why there is no space-time either. There can be no such thing because it too is linear. It's worse. It is 4D with an imaginary straight D. It's worse than that. It is not even a straight line distance through space. Instead, it's imaginary time. But time is neither linear nor spatial. I might add, neither is it imaginary. Neither is space. So now we go on to the second section, not 3D. I'm going to scroll down just a bit so we can get that on the page. We can find 1D in physics. Force is measured in 1D, which is to say on a straight line, as in the case of g-force, because a point center of g-force can be computed on an infinitesimal. That's a mouthful. I hope you're able to grasp these highfalutin combinations of words that I'm forced to produce in order to give you a direct perception of reality. That is what science is after now. It is what humans are always after if it can be achieved. I will show you how to achieve that. That also means that g-force at the surface of a gravitational body such as Earth can be computed on an integral. There is an integral force that can be computed for the entire surface of the spherical Earth. The straight line is convenient when 2 points are imagined. But do those points exist? No, they do not. Do you know who proved that? It was Albert Einstein. Okay? A point is not a Euclidean point. Do you know why? I hope you can guess. I don't want to give it away because you should figure that out for yourself. Why is what we call a point not actually a Euclidean point according to relativity? The easiest answer is to state the obvious. It's because a point does not exist just in space. It also exists in another dimension. It's not a linear dimension, though. That's my discovery. Each linear dimension is a convenience. I'll go back here. There are no D's in space. There exist neither 1 nor 2 nor 3 dimensional spaces. Neither does 4D space-time exist. Neither does any 0D point exist. You should be able to justify my statements in your own mind. Although it is somewhat paradoxical to do so, this is not paradoxical, it is superpositional. The concept of linear space is useful. Centuries have demonstrated to us conclusively, including to me, that linear computation is helpful to humans. What is baffling to us is that it's not adequate to explain reality. And I discovered the reason for that breach. It is our linear number system itself is incapable of formulating reality. And that's a mind bender, but I don't want you to be confused or balked by what I say. What I'm attempting to do is prepare your mind for the sequence to come. So let's go on. What does exist instead? If I'm correct in saying there's no such thing as linear dimensionality, then what replaces that? Especially, what is volume space if it's not 3D? Of course it's not 3D, but it is superpositional. You could, as we have done in science, make a very good case for saying that space has 3 dimensions. And I won't go into that because we're going to go into it in this sequence. It's very important that you have a direct perception of what is meant by linear dimensionality. Each linear dimension is a convenience. Euclid began with 0D because this definition of a point enables a quantum linear jump. If that does not make sense to you, listen to the prior video, because that's the reason I made the prior video to this on the last day of January, was to substantiate what I just said. So this is a summarization of something that has come before, which you may want to review, but I hope you don't need to. You should trust me at this point. You know that I cannot lie to you. I will only tell you the absolute truth of science. Very difficult to do, but I have been elected for that job. So that is the quantum linear jump, is from 0 to 1. That is called the Planck length, and you should accept that. That is definitely true. In order to measure distance, 2 points are required. They cannot have any dimension because only 1D has any dimensionality at all in distance. Thus we arrive at a Bronze Age concept of imaginarity. Imaginarity is my specialty. I've deconvolved what is meant by imaginarity. Also, infinity. The 1D line is also imaginary because it is made of nothing besides 0D points. That is the basis of the eternal controversy between continuity and quantization. Except that for now we're getting into it. Where the magic begins is with 2D, because the two imaginary lines can be axiomatized in Athens space to have a special relation called orthogonality. This is the key that I want you to come to understand in a new way, is the concept of orthogonality, which I now characterize as pure magic, which is a supernatural term. We also call this perpendicularity. You know about the hard right angle and how it produces the Pythagorean theorem, which is nothing except linear relationship dependent on orthogonality. Without the hard right angle, there would be no such thing as computational science. That can be rigorously proved, but I hope you accept that. What no one has ever realized throughout the history of mathematics is that this ortho-relation between two imaginary lines is itself not imaginary, for the same reason that the straight line distance from Earth's surface to Earth G-center is not through imaginary space. What we call real is fully dependent on straight line distance measurement. It's how we use our eyes to see into the distance on a parallax. We use trigonometry according to DNA programming to obtain a visual perceptual space that uncannily matches the actual universe. So vision is purely miraculous. There is no explanation for vision. Vision simply is. I, however, will explicate what vision actually is, because you need to know what vision actually is. What I'm emphasizing here, that true vision has 2 superpositional modes. We go on. This will all make more sense as we proceed. Remember, this is by far the most difficult problem that has ever faced the scientific mind. If you are a rational man, as I trust you are, or you would not be listening to me, then you know instinctively that it is your visual perceptual system that will negotiate the reality of reality for you. It's entirely based on visual perception. Nothing else is involved. Only our vision determines what is reality. And the reason for that is the almost exact match on physical reality as it's reconstructed in the human consciousness. It's automatic, it's a given, but it cannot be explained because it's too coherent. We see too much. It's not reasonable that we should see so continuously. We should be seeing flashes. We don't. We see what appears to us to be a continuous progression of time through continuous space. That is not an illusion, but it's also not linear. We need to leave behind linear perception. There's no such thing as 3D. Thus do we find that not specifically the D's in 3D are significant, but rather the fact that the D's are ortho-related. It is a compound super miracle that we can decompose space into a linear distance, which we then transfer to a planar concept of two ortho lines, and if you add a third ortho line, that by pure magic makes cubic space. That has mesmerized the ape mind. We're still in the ape stage while we see and think linearly, and all of mathematics is linear. Therefore, all of our understanding of the universe is based on linearity. That no longer will suffice. Nothing is linear. If you use 3D and you extend it to 4D spacetime, you get the most fantastic illusion ever conceived by the ape mind. What I will attempt to do for you, as has already been done for me by the universe, I will attempt to convey to you the teaching that the universe gave me, so that you also will have the teaching of the universe, not the teaching of Scott Allen Miller. This is not my idea, it's the universe's idea. That is called science. In all my schooling and reading, I've never once heard any mathematician comment upon the miraculous profundity of orthorelativity. Think about that word. Its existence proves something about human reality and physical reality both. The plain, ordinary existence of natural perpendicularity in perceptual space is likely the most profound fact ever encountered in the history of science. This is contextual. No one has ever commented upon this unaccountable fact that we see a 2D image in our mind. That's called a flat screen image. That has been proved, and you can prove it to yourself. We see a 2D image, and it is very instantly, that is, with a rapidity that defies explanation, we reinterpret the flat screen image to 3D, which is depth vision. Therefore, 2D and 3D are perceptions of orthorelation. Where does this orthogonality originate? Nobody has ever asked that question. How can orthogonality be so precise as to allow us to compose space into 3 linear dimensions? It's because of pure supernatural magic. It goes to imaginary space. It goes to the realm of the fantastic. This is what is baffling our mathematicians and physicists. They literally can't see what's right in front of their face. So that's what I'm going to provide for you. The vision that your mathematicians cannot achieve. It's sought with all power, strength, heart, and mind. Everything is going in to an interpretation of orthospace. Space-time is considered to be the ultimate expression of orthospace because it's four straight lines at right angles, one of which has to be invisible. That is called imaginary, and therefore time is composed into imaginary space. That is extraordinarily profound, but nobody knows why. I do. So that's what we're approaching. Depth is perpendicular to mental projection. We see 2D precisely because that is the simplest decomposition of a flat image. That is, 2D involves an ortho relation between two lines. That is why we square flat space, and that is why the speed of light is squared. Obviously, that is moronic. It is a composition of the ape mind. You can say it another way. We see an image at all because the image is not linear, but is rather extensive. That's different from square space. A flat image is simply flat. It has no linear characteristic. In fact, it is circular. But nobody has ever noticed that we don't see a flat squared image. We see a flat circular image. And when we project into the distance with depth, we are seeing spherically. It's not the third dimension, because that's linear. Nothing is linear. The flat screen image that physiologists have proved that we do see is not squared. It's just that it's convenient to square it because then you can use two lines in ortho relation to make a grid. And that enables the use of quantized numbers. We see an image at all because the image is not linear, but is rather extensive. When you look at the blackboard, you need no depth vision. Pausing finally to consider how we see, we find a natural progression from flat image to depth image, through which a straight line is a natural dimension. That is, we use parallax to fix a distance with our vision. Those are two straight lines from your two eyeballs, which you quickly, virtually automatically compute as a triangular parallax, which is redundant. Pausing finally to consider how we see, we find a natural progression from flat image to depth image, through which a straight line is a natural dimension. We all accept that, but it now needs to be questioned. That doesn't work anymore. That was an artifact of the Bronze Age. All of science is immersed in linearity because nobody can think outside the box. That is absolutely required now, but we don't want to go psychotic, which is exactly what is happening in science. It has already gone psychotic. That's everywhere apparent on YouTube and in all the popular books that come out. They're all devoted to this insanity. So it's high time to see through the illusion. That's why I'm here. So this is how we get all the D's. They result from visual interpretation. Well, that simply doesn't work anymore. That was an artifact of the Bronze Age. Whereas humans haven't changed a bit since Greek inception, space has, and so has time. In fact, what we are dealing with now is a new form of dimensionality, a form so fantastical that all of science's physicists and mathematicians are now just so many monkeys, truly ridiculous personages. I will emphasize that and continue to emphasize that. Start cultivating a healthy disrespect for mathematicians. It's very important that you mistrust them now. They're not your gurus. They're not the leaders. They're slaves. And they're completely deluded under a system so powerful they can't even see it. Whereas you don't need to kick sand in their faces, neither should you credit them with intelligence. Their intelligence is controlled by a higher power that they are unaware controls them. They are, in fact, those geeks, those nerds, whose sense of superiority is proportional to their ignorance. These are the men worth hating. If you're a rational man, you must learn to hate your mathematicians. They are not your friends. They're your enemies. Edward Frankel is a wonderful man. I'm not saying you need to kick sand in Edward Frankel's face. You show ordinary respect for a man according to his accomplishments. Whether he's working under a delusional system or not is not for you or me to judge. However, we are forced to judge them in our own minds. Now you may see a contradiction there. There is a war going on, in case you were unaware of it. It's not being fought in Israel or Ukraine. It's not being fought anywhere on the surface of the earth. It's being fought between two powerful intelligences, one of which is good and one of which is evil. And if you don't like that, sayonara, sucker. You can turn this off anytime you want. But my duty will not be abrogated by your stupidity. The existence of G-force is palpably the greatest unsolved mystery of all time. Now you notice I'm saying G-force instead of gravity. This is in order to correct a prevalent misconception which even Dr. Sabina Hassenfelder simply misrepresents. But she's not alone. About half of I'll just call them scientists. About half of science, I'll just put it that way, is on the side of saying that gravity is not a force. Well, that's the product of monkey thinking. That's a monkey's point of view, is that gravity cannot be a force. The actual misperception that underlies Dr. Sabina Hassenfelder's stupidity, as well as other scientists, is very easy to bring out into the open so you can see that she's absolutely wrong. Gravity has to be a force. Of course it's a force. But you see, the reason why foolish mathematicians who don't know how to think insist on saying that gravity is not a force as if they had any idea of what they're talking about. When Dr. Sabina Hassenfelder insists that gravity is not a force, what she is attempting to assert is that gravity is not a manifestation of Newtonian motion. Newtonian motion alone defines force in science, but we've learned that Newtonian motion cannot fully explain the concept of force. Force is not necessarily Newtonian. The reason I say Newtonian is because a force is always conceived to involve motion. Well, you could look for a long time in a gravitational field and not ever find motion. That's because gravity is not a Newtonian force, but it is a force. You know what kind of a force it is? I discovered this, so I hope you can accept this without the necessary proof. Gravity is a space force. It's a force that acts on space. It's passive in that sense. So it's not a classical force, but it is a force because it affects space. Space would not be curved unless there were gravity. And curvature requires force in order for space to be bent, and space is curved. We will be proving that. The most fantastic aspect of G-force is its centricity, and centricity will now be my byline. I learned this serendipitously through the effort of a good friend who is now just freshly landed in India within the past 2 days. He's going to be there for 2 months in India. But before he left, he gave me a book called The Biocentric Universe by Dr. Robert Lanza. I'm sorry, I temporarily forgot his name. Um, I read that book all the way through at my friend's behest, and I was vitally impressed with the nonsensicality of the book. Biocentrism is a hoax, of course. It's not entirely a hoax. It simply isn't science. It cannot be because the tenets of biocentrism cannot be established. It has no logical basis. What it does offer is correlation of facts, but it's a religious point of view. It's an attempt to perform some magic. However, it is based in scientific principles, so it's not off the wall. What I mulled over for several days was not the nature of biocentrism, which doesn't really have any meaning yet, although it might, but the concept of centrism. Biocentrism means a center to life. Now, this is just an emblematic word. Titles such as that don't necessarily indicate the underlying scientific logic. There is logic behind biocentrism, but what I became fascinated with was the word. Because obviously that's a compound word where life has a center. Now, what's being attempted is to say that consciousness is the center of life. And that is then conjoined with a notion of reality, such that Dr. Robert Lanza felt sufficiently motivated to propose what has been called a new theory of the universe. The title of his book is The Biocentric Universe. Now that makes no sense. Now we're vastly involved in philosophy due to the stalemate that exists now in science, where we're forced to use our imagination in new ways to try to get around the roadblock. I found the way to do that, and biocentrism certainly is not it. But the concept of centrism is vital, and I'm going to show you why. The most fantastic aspect of G-force is its centricity, that it has a center. Well, that could be called a hole. Technically, it's called a monopole. It's not electromagnetic in the sense of having a positive and negative pole. Instead, gravity only has one pole. The center of gravity is the pole of gravity. What exists around that pole, which is the center of gravity, what exists around it is called a field. And a field is the opposite of a point. Every field has a point center, and every point center has a field. That was proved by Ruđer Josip Bošković, and you can accept that. We go on now. We shall speak of this for some time to come, that is centricity, but first we should like to obtain our bracket for the AE presentation, which is this. Hypercentrism. The fact that biocentrism has hit some deep fancy is profoundly indicative of the depth of psychosis gripping physics right now. Physics is psychotic now. Physics is psychotic because the physicists are all mathematicians. Mathematicians are retards. They're retarded people. They're dysfunctional people. They have a special so-called gift. It is not a gift. What it is a part of the human mental phenotype, whereby some men are gifted with mathematic perception beyond the norm. And this is encountered every day in every school all over the world with poor niggers that are forced to learn calculus. And anybody who is forced to learn calculus is a government nigger. They're retards. They're incapable of surviving any other way except with their mathematical ability. And the reason for that is due to the hegemony of the evil consciousness, which is produced by too many men thinking too much together. That produces satanic manifestation, as we know from the hydrogen bomb. Just to give you a point of reference, I could just say warfare or injustice or sin or evil, but I don't want to confuse you, because you're retarded too. And until you see how retarded you are, you will make no progress in any way. So I'm here to help you, first of all, by bringing you down. You don't know the things that you were taught. You were brainwashed. So physics is psychotic now. Mathematicians are retarded people. They are government monkeys, a product of true evolution. True evolution. Natural selection does not occur in DNA transmission, but natural selection does occur under government control. The gov selects whom it wants from a pen of monkeys called a school. The monkeys who can show aptitude for maths, that's a British term, maths, are sifted out. The rest are unwanted. The math monkeys are then sifted for physics math monkeys. This unnatural selection process is covered with Darwinian fascist propaganda, forcing humans to become gov slaves. The gov project is so evil, so satanic, that religion itself must be eliminated from society sufficiently to suppress any notion of natural morality. Anybody who is in politics is a murderer for that reason, because you're supporting an evil system. Anybody who votes is a monkey. You've been brainwashed. There is no form of control at all over any government. A government is satanic. Until you see that and you process it somehow with your own lexicon of words, you simply cannot get out of the trap. So I'm here to show you the way out. It's a funny thing about being in a trap such as we are trapped in. And don't forget, I was caught in the trap too. It's remarkably difficult to get out of that. But there is a way using rational logic, and that's why I'm here, is to show you a bulletproof, shock-resistant way of getting out of this enormous trap that we're trapped in. Basically, society, government-controlled society. Your mathematicians are fully under the control of the evil power. There is no overlap. It's nothing but evil. You might say, then how can I say that I'm divorced from that if it's pure evil? Magic, a belief system, a faith system, a superstitious system if you prefer to be God himself and judge me. But I don't suggest you do that or you'll lose your fucking soul. Alright, so let's go on. This unnatural selection process is covered with Darwinian fascist propaganda. Religion itself must be eliminated from society to suppress any notion of natural morality. All this evil prospect fits into a system of oppressive indoctrination so morbid as to defy analysis. Well, happily for all of us, I'm here. I've done the analysis. I'm simply sharing what I know. You are forced to worship these indecent mathematicians. You are permitted no choice, because 1984, that's a book, and Skynet, which is from a movie, were already here before those fantasies were spun by post-Zionist Hollywood moguls. Star Wars is no accident, and is nothing short of necromancy. It all seems so innocent. All the war, the politics, the Dow industry. Now the youths play with Buzz Lightyear incubi because the gov wants its power in outer space, so you have to get the children ready for that. I was brought up that way. The gov also wants cyborg killers. China has a whole army of these and is ready to take over the world pretty much any time now. It also wants cyborg killers, so it fosters genetic splicing. That's so the government can have an army of cyborgs. It also wants the doomsday device, so it fosters Hadron Collider mad science with monkey mad scientists. All the movie images of the mad scientist were flooded to market in order to condition the public to its predetermined fate. Who controls this mad machine? To answer that is to court death. It's Zion, of course. At least that's what the Matrix series was meant to enforce. Remember Matrix 2? What is it the good guys, such as Neo and Morpheus, were fighting to defend? In the movie, it's called Zion. That movie was made by Zionists. And Zion is back on the map, and Zion runs America. You see how everything fits? No, it's not fun. Of course you want to tear that to shreds. That's because you're a nigger retard. That is what you were raised to be. An idiot slave. You're trained to attack religion. You're trained to attack anything that defies the governmental system. That's who you are. And if you vote, there's your proof. All right. Why fight the machine? Why, of course, to protect Zion. What else? Well, in case you hadn't looked recently, Zion is at the helm of America. What more proof do you need than American-Israeli unity? What more proof do you need than the hegemony of evil physics? What is keeping physics from achieving its goals? One way to answer that question is to observe who and what controls science propaganda. Whereas several researchers are allowed to complain, even to impugn, no one is allowed to halt the machine. Whatever is allowed, it is only enough to distract the herd of slaves, as the slaves continue their work. Whatever happens, the master plan cannot be slowed or aborted. What then is the master plan? Does anyone know? Logically, someone would have to know, or else this human experiment is simply a muck, without a goal, without a purpose, without any ultimate meaning. But that is illogical. Of course there is a master overseeing the master plan. The problem there is the master is evil. That cannot be God, but it certainly is some kind of God. That would be Satan, whose existence is confirmed in every religion that has ever existed. This is the reason why Dr. Richard Dawkins attacked Deepak Chopra. Religion is not simply a fantasy about God. It is the tale of a war between two gods. And that ends our presentation for today. In order to prepare you for proportional space, which will reinvent science. I discovered this. This is Anagalactic, bringing you the secrets of the universe. I hope you enjoyed our overture to proportional space, which explains physics in terms of quantum gravity and a two-force dynamic system originally discovered by Ruger Joseph Boshkovich in 1745. Keep looking up.